Today in our series for November is all about finding the right property to renovate, finding a good property to renovate, a good property to get started with, a good property if you want it for long-term buy and hold, or a good property if you want to just renovate it for yourself to move into. Like, it's all about finding the good property, the good property. Everyone's fear, or a lot of people have a fear of buying a dud. And that's a real fear, because if you actually make a mistake like that, if you buy a dud like that, you will find that you will never, ever get started. Like, you'll never be able, well, you get started, but you'll never be able to go from that one property to the next. It's super important that every move be a decent move, be a good move. You don't want to get yourself stuck in a corner. I have a firm belief that the worst type of property that you can buy, which is the one usually suggested by accountants to save on tax, is a new property that's negatively geared. I really think that then you're just sitting around waiting for growth. That's okay if that property was bought in the last couple of years and there's been some growth, but let me tell you, there's a lot of quiet years between what's happened recently and what was happening many years ago. So here we go. It's all about identifying a good location, finding a good property to get started in your renovation journey. Guys, feel free to comment and let me know that you're here, if you're here. And as you know, these videos are placed in YouTube, in the Renovate and Real Estate YouTube channel. Feel free to join us over there as well. So let's get started. So based on your decision about three things, like everyone says, how do I know where to start? Like, where do I even start? How can I identify a good location? I don't know where to buy. One friend tells me this, another friend tells me that, and you just feel pulled from pillar to post based on the information supplied to you by well-meaning people who usually don't have a clue. So let's talk about where to base your decision, like what you need to base your decision on. Number one is affordability. Research and think about how much you can afford. There is no point falling in love with a specific area or a specific property if it's out of reach. No point. There is no point doing due diligence on a location that, even though you'd love to be able to get into, you're not going to be able to afford a property. Or if you do afford a property there, you're not going to be able to eat or go out once every blue moon because you're so tied up financially. So in amongst affordability is what the mortgage broker or your lender will let you have, how much money they'll let you have. Plus, don't forget to budget for your renovation lending as well. And on top of that, how tight you're prepared to live as a family, like what your budget is like. Like, do you want to really tighten the belt, or do you not want this to affect you financially so you can live your life as you do now? So that's a personal choice. Affordability is actually a personal choice. Go and find out how much you want to borrow, see what you're comfortable borrowing, and talk to everybody else this will influence, including your partners. The other thing is DIY. When you're looking for a location, there's no point choosing something 7 hours away if you really intend on doing lots of hands-on stuff. It is okay if you want to just get a crew in to go and do the renovation for you, but if you want to be actively involved in DIYing a project, you want it to be in a reasonable distance. Now, I get lots of people thinking that a reasonable distance is 15 minutes away. So I want you to consider this. If you're in, say, one of the capital cities and your affordability means that you can't do something that's only 15 minutes away, which feels really comfortable, right? But you can't do it. Think about how much a good renovation flip will bring into your back pocket. Convert that to how much in comparison you earn every hour at your job. And then work out whether it's worth getting in the car and perhaps putting yourself out a little bit and the family out for a few weeks, going to, say, somewhere that's 2 hours away to do your first renovation, or 2.5 hours even. Work out how much you're prepared to be inconvenienced for just a short term for the better good, for the greater good. One of my DIY renovations was 3 hours and 40 minutes away, 3 hours and 40 minutes away. And that included a little pit stop for a cup of tea along the way. But that's what I determined was okay for me and my family, because I determined that the money I was going to make from that and the leapfrogging I could do in the property market because of that inconvenience, that short-term inconvenience, I determined that was worth it. And my family determined that it was okay that I spend lots of time going up and down the freeway to get to this particular property. And it was worth it. So I'm grateful for that experience. So don't be in this thing like, oh, I can't renovate because I really can't find the perfect house within 15 minutes of where I live. If you work with me, I'll call you out on that kind of self-languaging, because that is just an excuse not to do anything at all. All right, so the other thing you've got to look out for, is the purpose of the property. Is it a buy and hold? Like, what is it to your portfolio? What is it going to be? What is the purpose? Is it going to be to hold it there for the long term? So you're after really nice growth in a great location that's, it's like a really healthy town, a healthy position where the property is going to grow. You can push some value onto that property, force value onto that property through the renovation, but it's also going to be a good one to hold. And your rental income is going to be really healthy. So you're not living on mincemeat or sausages for years while you struggle to pay down a property. So number one, you want the growth. And number two, you want some really good rental income if you're going to hold that property. If you're going to flip that property, you just need it to be a nice place where you know that there are interested buyers. Not so important. I mean, you don't want to go in somewhere where it's like a town that's tumbling in property values, just so long as it's healthy and there's a nice level of growth and security, it's a popular kind of place, is more important. So due diligence, there's heaps of free stuff, guys. Realestate.com.au, domain.com.au, on the house, all free stuff where you can research what properties are selling for, what sold properties are selling for or have sold for, what's inside those properties. You've got oodles of pictures. If you go to domain and realestate.com, sometimes they have 20 or so pictures, and that might be the property before the people grabbed it and worked on it. Every time the property comes up for sale, they're logged under that address. And sometimes you can see the progress of what's happened to that property over time. Really valuable information on the free sites. Realistically, that's all you need to get a really good start in this. And then there's some paid sites as well. There's Investor. I really like Real Estate Investor as its full name. And you can buy the RP Data professional package from Insight Real Estate Investor. And there's RP Data as a standalone product through RP Data. CoreLogic supply all the data to these guys. Most of the data in relation to all of these places, whether it be free or paid, comes from CoreLogic. And then they put their spin on it and they collect it and produce it in different ways. All right, so the most overwhelming part when people come to me is they go, oh, where do I buy? And I think, well, where are you looking? And they're looking at the entire map of Australia. That is the map of overwhelm. I call that the map of overwhelm. Because when you're looking at that, you'll hear people saying, oh, Tassie's gone really well. Go and have a look in Tassie. And then you might hear someone say, oh, Sydney property market has moved like nothing else in the last 2 years. You should stick around that capital city. And then you hear people say, oh, look what's happening in Queensland and up north on the Sunshine Coast. And look at Maroochydore and everything's happening around there or due to happen there. And, oh, there's a light train here. And there's, oh, my goodness, the map of overwhelm. So you always have to go back to these three things: your level of affordability, how much DIY you want to do. You can buy anywhere in Australia if you don't want DIY and you want to get a crew in on the ground. There's ways you can do that and renovate from a distance. But if you want to DIY, you have to consider that you will be going back and forth. And you need to set your hourly limit on like how far you will actually travel and what the purpose of the property is. Always come back to those three things and then start to really nut it down. And how you find a great location is you look for locations that you really love. So say I've just drawn this circle here on this map. So this is the New South Wales border and here's Queensland. It's just an example for today, right? But if you were looking at this section here, which is really popular, Mermaid Beach, Nobby Beach, Miami, Broad Beach, they're really beautiful places to live and they're very, very popular suburbs because they're on the coast. If you can't afford that, but you really like what's happening there, start having a look at the surrounding suburbs. Because if this is really popular, usually as a flow-on effect, these places really start to pick up too, because these people who live here can also experience the lifestyle that is produced by these beachside suburbs. So Robina is a great little place to invest in. There are lots of tired 25, 30-year-old houses in Robina at the moment that can all do with some uplift, and you can make some profit in Robina. And when I say Robina, mate, these places are all up and down the coast. Please do not believe people when they say there's no places with the ability to make renovation profit. That's them and their own opinion and their own limiting beliefs based on zero research, usually just what they think. So have a look at these suburbs that will do well because of this. Also, if there's a main highway, sometimes one side of a highway performs differently than the other. You might want to be on the eastern side of the highway. You might only be able to afford the western side. So start to have a look at the towns just on the western side of the main freeways and see, you know, are they moving? Are they doing okay? Because on this side, they're actually doing okay. So there's lots of things to consider, but start by just dropping a circle around your favorite place where you'd really like to buy and examining what's happening in their neighborhoods. That's the easiest way, guys. So selecting a good area, you have to look out for quite a few things. You have to look out for the growth potential of the area, particularly if you're buying and holding. It at least has to be nice and healthy if you're going to do a quick flip. You have to look out for the demographics and consider who your buyers and renters will be. If you're looking at an area and it doesn't feel good for you, no matter how pretty you're making a house, that area is not going to feel good either for your buyers. You can change the house itself, its internal and external look, but you cannot change the feel or the vibe of an area. So, you know, I quite often say you can feel it in your loins if you walk through a place and you can feel that it's got potential. You know, the cafes are a little bit vibrant and you can feel the gentrification of an area, nice new humans moving into the space, you know, the changes, new schools being built, new shops coming like Bunnings and Woolworths, like major shops coming, then that's your area. Think about the demographic who's going to be living in that area. They're the people you'll be selling to, or they'll be your long-term renters. You need solid employment. Some areas crack off because of some kind of touristy thing that's happening right then and there, but long-term, there's not enough substantial employment to keep that particular place healthy. That happens a lot in regional centres. You need good, solid employment. You need good industries, and you need more than one industry in a town. If a town is only supported by one industry, if that industry goes kaput, half the people in the town move out, and that just has a significant impact on your property. And we see this a lot in mining towns in particular. So be very, very careful about where you buy. If you make mistakes like that, there's a couple of students I have, it's cost them $500,000 buying in the wrong area. It's really important to do your due diligence and look for good, solid employment across a few industries. And always look for a big price gap between your renovated and your unrenovated properties. That nice disparity, that is your profit margin. You've got your property, you're going to pay some money to renovate that property. So that's your costs plus all of the other real estate exchange costs. So you've got those costs. Then you want to sell at that. In between is your chunk of profit. The bigger disparity between the nicely renovated homes in an area and the unrenovated properties in that same area, comparing best you can apples to apples with the type of renovation you feel confident you could do, then the more you're in for a successful deal. So the property, it's got to be a healthy property, guys. It must be well. It must feel good. There are so many people right now with this fear of missing out that have buyer's agents, and sometimes greedy buyer's agents, on the ground knocking on doors in areas they would never have bought in beforehand, and all of a sudden they're going, oh, it's all I can get, so I'm just going to buy in this town. If you buy in a dud town, if you buy a dud property, when the market settles and everything calms down again, and it will, you're going to be left with a dud. Don't just go and rush into something that's a dud because you're afraid of missing out right now. Property health checklist. Let's have a look at some of the things that we consider. And there are many things that my students will run their properties through. Growth is one, a nice growth area. Acceptable rental income for that property. And when I say acceptable for me, that means positive, or at worst, neutral if the area is in a high growth area, if the property is in a high growth area. Cash flow. I do not want to be paying money out of my pocket to hold properties. I don't. Percentage renters versus homeowners. You don't necessarily want to buy in an area where there are lots of renters, because when you sell, if you're doing a flip, you're going to be selling to investor. In short, you're going to be selling to most probably an investor. You're probably not going to be selling to a homeowner if the majority of people in that area are renters, and it's an investor kind of infiltrated location. And investors buy based on facts and figures, and you want to produce a property that tugs on the emotions of a buyer so that that buyer pays you more. So if you're doing a renovation, I want you to be playing in a space where there are lots and lots of homeowners. I think that's a much safer place to play. And that's where you get your higher profits, because you're going to be selling to a lady like this who falls in love with the property because she can picture this family in that property. And so she wants it so bad, she's going to up the offer and pay for more. You don't necessarily want to be in an area where there's lots of social housing, or there's anything that you don't have control of changing. Like I said before, you can actually fix up the inside of a place. You can do a lot with the facade, but you can't change what's around you. You can't change if you're in the popular school zones or not. You can't change that kind of stuff. So be very, very careful about the property you buy. There's lots of things that you need to check out for. Those were just a little bit of a snippet of a few. Then when you actually get settled on your location, then you compare street to street. I want you to start to focus on the potential of the property itself. Like, don't get emotionally excited about buying a property so that you forget what you were looking for in the first place. So focus on that renovation potential. I see a lot of times people start looking for a property like this. They go, okay, this is a cosmetic renovation that I can handle. I can do this in a short amount of time. There's no extending to be done on this property. There's just some prettying up, and I can make some uplift inside, and the layout's not so bad. So I hear students chasing down properties like this, and then last minute, they'll be emotionally attached for some reason to something different. And if that something different doesn't have a good layout, or it costs them more money than they anticipated to renovate because it's old weatherboard that needs repairing, or it's full of asbestos or whatever, it can throw out your original dream and the parameters you set for yourself. So be really careful not to fall emotionally in love with the deal. So stick to your plan. If you want a 3-bedroom brick house to renovate, don't be dragged around by the real estate showing you other stuff. Stick to your game plan. So there's a lot of cost in changing the layout of a property. So you want the layout to make sense. Like, you really do want, if you can, this is actually not a perfect example. You want, if you can, kitchen and living and family out the back, because as Aussies, we all like to be out the back, sitting in the sunshine in the afternoon, having a glass of wine or a beer, watching the kids play out in the backyard, that whole indoor-outdoor vibe. And you really do want your bedroom somewhere else if you can. So this is not a great plan. Not the worst plan I've seen, but not a great plan. There's a couple of things that concern me about this, but think about how much it's going to cost to change a layout if it's not perfect. If it's okay and you're going to sell the property and it's going to make sense to your new owners, that's great. But if it's going to change, if you're going to have to change the layout, think about, moving plumbing and renovation costs that just start to escalate when you want to switch around rooms. And also the time you've set for yourself. If you wanted to do a 3 to 6 week renovation and make money, like many of my students do in that amount of time, 3 to 6 weeks, then don't get yourself a property that's going to take you 12 to 14 weeks to do. Take on something that just needs some quick cosmetic fixes, because the longer the time, the more you're holding costs, and that's costs that, you might be paying more money to the bank per month, and therefore it's less profit in the pocket for you. So get really clear on what it is you're after, what type of house you're searching for, whether it be a big or a small renovation, that's up to you, whether it be brick or weatherboard, that's up to you too. And don't be distracted. And don't take advice from people who don't know what they're talking about. It can land you in trouble. And when I say trouble, I mean it can land you in a financial corner that's going to take you years to recover from. The difference is you might make a few $100,000 in property if you're stuck in a corner waiting for the growth, etc. Whereas if you're in a moving market and you can turn over some properties and you can go and do some investing, some buy and holds, plus some renovation and flips, then that's when you can really expand your portfolio so that it's worth millions in a shorter amount of time, because you're just forcing value on property and you're growing from there. All right, so mums and dads, renovators and decorators Facebook group, make sure you follow along there and you come to these lives every Tuesday at 12 o'clock. The recordings are in the guides of the group and they're also in YouTube. 3 ways I work with people. Number 1 is I teach people how to renovate, me and the team Renovate and Real Estate, not just me alone. Experienced renovators and most importantly, really kind women. Not that I won't hire a guy, just at the moment I have lots of ladies in the group. Teaching other people how to renovate, whether they're brand new beginners or whether they're experienced. There's a lot to learn in the renovation space so that you can renovate like a professional. If you're too worried about doing a renovation and you're really worried to the point where you won't get a start or you can't seem to get a start, then you need to connect with me, make an appointment here at renovateandrealestate.com.au/call and talk to me about how you can renovate alongside our renovation coaches. And also, if you'd like to renovate for a living, if you love it so much, you've already got some skills or you'd like to build on your skills and one day tell your boss to shove it and renovate for a living, then you can work with me personally on developing a business around your renovation skills. All right, so that's it for this week. Have a beautiful week. I will see you next week. Don't forget our November theme is all about finding good property and making that start, that really important start. Otherwise, renovating is just a dream unless you get going. Bye, guys. Cheers.